Imagine standing outside a glittering gala, surrounded by luxury cars, only to laugh at an elderly black man in an old, beat-up car. But what if I told you that man, mocked by everyone, was about to drop a bombshell that would leave you speechless? What if he's not who you think he is, and the car he drives hides a shocking truth? Stay with us, because what happens next will completely change the way you see success, appearance, and judgment. You won't believe the twist that unfolds, and it's coming up next. Don't miss the jaw-dropping twist. Hit subscribe now and be the first to see what happens next. The night was alive with the pulse of flashing cameras and the hum of luxury cars arriving at the gala. A sea of expensive suits and shimmering gowns flowed up the red carpet, their owners exuding an air of effortless elegance. The venue, a grand hotel perched at the edge of the city, gleamed with crystal chandeliers and gold trim, its vast ballroom shimmering with the glitter of the elite. Everywhere you looked, there was wealth, extravagant, opulent wealth, the kind that made you feel both privileged and small at the same time. Amidst the crowd, Robert Davis walked calmly, as though the world around him didn't exist. His footsteps were deliberate, his presence as dignified as it was understated. The elderly black man, in his late 70s, stood out in a way that had nothing to do with what he wore. He was dressed in a classic tailored suit that spoke of taste and a quiet confidence, though it had the faintest signs of wear. His shoes, polished and sturdy, moved with a steadiness that mirrored his years of experience, but it was the car that he had arrived in that truly caught the eye. It wasn't a sleek new sports car like the others lining the red carpet. His was an old, weathered muscle car, its once glossy paint now dulled by years of use. The chrome grille had lost its shine, and the tires, though functional, seemed a little too tired to be here. The guests passing by glanced at him, their eyes flickering in judgment. A few snickered, muttering things under their breath. "What's that? The valet's car?" one young woman whispered, her voice sharp with amusement. Another man, laughing, remarked, "He must have gotten lost on the way to a junkyard." But Robert paid them no mind. His face remained calm, his eyes narrowed slightly as if seeing more than the world around him. There was no anger, no embarrassment, just a quiet kind of knowing. He adjusted his cufflinks as he approached the entrance, ignoring the murmurs and sidelong glances. The doorman opened the door for him with an almost reflexive politeness. He stepped inside, the cool air of the grand ballroom welcoming him, though it was more out of habit than any genuine recognition of who he was. Inside, the sound of glasses clinking, light chatter, and a soft jazz band playing in the background filled the air. It was everything Robert had expected, elegant but superficial. As he moved through the crowd, Robert kept his distance. His eyes took in the luxurious decor, the high-ceilinged space, and the polished guests, but it was the people who piqued his interest more than the surroundings. He could see them, the ambitious ones, the ones whose lives were painted in the colors of perfection. They spoke in hushed tones, glanced at their phones every few seconds, and made sure to smile just the right way for the cameras. They didn't know it, but they were all searching for something. Robert knew that. He had been there once, a long time ago. A sharp laugh broke his reverie. Emma, a young woman in her late 20s, stood nearby, glancing at him with a mix of curiosity and thinly veiled disdain. Her friends hovered around her, their eyes scanning the room, looking for the next opportunity to network, to make their next big connection. Emma's gaze landed on Robert's old car parked outside. "Is that the valet's car?" she said, her voice loud enough for him to hear. "What a joke." The others laughed, a slight, dismissive chuckle that echoed in the air like a hollow, empty thing. Robert didn't flinch. His expression remained calm, even serene. He had long learned the art of being invisible in a crowd, of letting others project whatever they needed to onto him. He wasn't here to fit in. He was here for something else. Emma's laughter died out after a moment, but she didn't stop staring at him, her gaze now more curious than mocking. She tilted her head, watching as Robert moved toward the center of the room, where the crowd seemed to part instinctively as if giving him space. She felt an odd pull, a sense that there was more to him than met the eye. Something about his composure, his quiet presence, made her wonder if he was more than just an aging man with a dilapidated car. She shook the thought off. After all, it was probably just her own curiosity. There was no way someone like him could have anything to offer in a world like this. He was just a relic of a forgotten time, nothing more. "Who is he?" Emma whispered to her friend, still watching Robert as he slowly made his way to the bar. "Seriously, who drives a car like that to a gala?" Her friend shrugged dismissively. "I don't know, but he clearly doesn't care what anyone thinks." That was the moment it hit her. There was something about him, a quiet strength perhaps, or maybe just the way he held himself, unfazed by the stares or the laughter. He was an anomaly, and for some reason Emma couldn't stop watching him. She didn't know why. She told herself it was just curiosity, nothing more. But the question lingered. Who was this man, really? Meanwhile, Robert didn't pay any attention to the murmurs. His focus was elsewhere. His eyes scanned the crowd, not with judgment, but with quiet awareness. He was a man who had lived through the noise of life and learned to block out the distractions. What mattered was the work, the legacy, the things that lasted, and the things that didn't, the superficial, the transient, he didn't waste his time on. He made his way through the gala, exchanging polite nods with the few people who acknowledged his presence. There were no grand gestures, no attempts to draw attention to himself. He wasn't looking for validation. He had built his name, his company, without ever needing the applause of the crowd, and that had always been the point. But tonight, as he moved through the crowd, Robert could feel the weight of their gaze, the lingering judgment, and the curiosity beginning to rise. They didn't know him, but they would soon. Robert had always believed that in a world obsessed with appearances, the quiet ones were the ones who had the most power. He stopped at the bar and ordered a drink, his hand steady as he raised the glass to his lips. He didn't need to prove anything. He wasn't here for the accolades. He was here to remind himself that he had built something real, something that had endured. And as long as he carried that knowledge within him, the opinions of the crowd didn't matter. Across the room, Emma watched him again, her gaze sharp but uncertain now. She could feel the tension building in her chest, a strange pull she couldn't quite name. The night stretched on, filled with laughter, music, and meaningless conversation. But for Emma, the only thing that seemed to matter was the man in the corner, the one with the old car and the quiet strength. What was his story? And more importantly, why did it feel like it had something to teach her? As the night went on, Emma found herself unable to shake the question. And unknowingly, she was beginning to embark on a journey that would change everything she thought she knew about success, about wealth, and about the man who had quietly mastered both. The gala continued around Robert like a whirlwind of superficiality and glittering distractions. He was an island in the midst of it all, moving through the crowd with the practiced ease of someone who had long since stopped caring whether anyone noticed him. His every movement was deliberate, every glance measured, as if he were surveying a world he no longer wished to be a part of. Yet, even in his quiet withdrawal, there was something magnetic about him, something that made people pause, if only for a moment, and wonder. Emma couldn't tear her eyes away. There was a strange allure to Robert, something in the way he seemed to exist outside the frantic, shallow world around them. She found herself following him, not physically, but in her mind, as if the weight of his presence was pulling her attention with an invisible thread. She looked at her phone for a moment, scrolling through social media, checking her latest posts to reassure herself that she was still connected in the way that mattered. But it didn't take long before she glanced back at Robert, who was now engaged in conversation with a group of older men at the far side of the room. The contrast between Robert and these men was striking. They were dressed to the nines, their tailored suits clearly costing more than Emma's rent, their faces lined with the kind of smug satisfaction that only decades of wealth could bring. Yet, as they spoke, Robert remained calm and unflappable, a quiet observer of the grand spectacle. He wasn't trying to impress anyone, nor was he attempting to fit in. He was simply there, listening, speaking only when necessary, but somehow commanding the conversation with his presence alone. Emma, leaning casually against a column, felt her curiosity grow with each passing minute. Who was this man? She needed to know more. Before she could make a move, Gregory appeared by her side. He was the host of the event, and his presence was as polished and smooth as his $5,000 suit. Gregory had the kind of charm that was almost too perfect, too practiced. He wore his wealth like armor, using it to disarm those around him. His eyes immediately found Emma, and a smile curved his lips. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice warm but with an edge of calculation, like he was trying to read her mood. Emma smiled back, a little too quickly, and nodded. "I'm fine. Just enjoying the atmosphere." Gregory's gaze shifted across the room, lingering on Robert for a moment before his lips curled into a slight smirk. "Interesting character, isn't he?" he said, his voice lowered so only Emma could hear. "I've seen him around before. Old money, I'd bet. Or maybe just someone who missed the memo on dressing for the occasion." Emma followed his gaze, her brow furrowing. "You know him?" "Not really," Gregory replied, his tone dismissive. "But I know of him. His name's Robert Davis, used to be a mechanic, built a small company back in the day. Word is he's got some kind of luxury brand now. Quiet guy. Doesn't really play the game like the rest of us." Gregory's eyes glinted as he looked back at Emma. "I don't know why he bothers coming to these events. Probably just likes the attention." Emma was silent for a moment, absorbing Gregory's words. There was something about Robert that didn't fit with what Gregory had just said. Luxury brand? She had no idea. It didn't add up. The man looked like he belonged to another time altogether, far removed from this modern circus of endless networking and hollow smiles. "So, he's successful?" she asked, her voice betraying her curiosity despite herself. Gregory chuckled lightly. "Successful in his own way, I suppose. But it's not really the kind of success that gets you an invite to the top of the ladder. He's not in our circle." He paused, scanning the room. "But I guess there's room for everyone at a party like this, huh?" Emma frowned, sensing there was more to the story than Gregory was letting on. "Do you know what his company is? What does he do?" Gregory shrugged, his smile never faltering. "I've heard he owns a brand of high-end craftsmanship, something about heritage. But who knows? I've never really seen the point in talking to people who don't know how to play the game. They're not the ones making the big moves." Emma didn't respond right away, her thoughts racing. Something about what Gregory had said didn't sit right with her. She wanted to ask more questions, to dig deeper into Robert's story. But before she could, Gregory shifted the topic back to business, and Emma, caught off guard, found herself swept along once again in the tide of shallow conversation. But she couldn't forget about Robert. As the night wore on, Emma found herself stealing glances at him whenever she could. He had moved from the group of men to a quieter part of the ballroom, where a large fireplace flickered softly in the corner. Robert sat alone now, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his eyes distant but calm. He didn't seem to be interested in making small talk with anyone. He just sat there, as if content with his own thoughts. She stood at the edge of the room, watching him, torn between curiosity and hesitation. What was he doing here? Why did he even bother? And why was she so drawn to him? Without realizing it, Emma found herself walking toward him. She hadn't planned it. She didn't even know what she was going to say. But the question burned in her mind, pulling her forward. She wanted to understand. She needed to know why he seemed so different from everyone else in the room. The world she had grown up in, where appearances meant everything, felt so small compared to the quiet force that was Robert Davis. When she reached him, Robert didn't look up right away. He took another slow sip of his drink, then turned his head slightly, acknowledging her presence without surprise. "You're the young woman with the sharp tongue," he said, his voice soft but carrying a weight of experience that seemed to fill the air between them. Emma blinked, caught off guard. I didn't mean to offend you, she said quickly, her words rushing out. She felt silly for her earlier comment. Robert smiled faintly. I wasn't offended. People have been laughing at me for a long time. It doesn't bother me anymore. He paused, his eyes settling on her. But you're curious. About me, about the car, about why I'm here. You don't have to say it out loud. It's written all over your face. Emma swallowed hard. There it was again, that feeling. The pull to know more. I don't understand, she confessed, her voice softer now. You don't fit in with any of this. Why come here? Why even show up if you don't care about the stuff everyone else does? Robert's eyes twinkled, just the smallest hint of humor dancing in them. He set his glass down and leaned back in his chair, folding his hands in front of him. You think you know what I care about, he said slowly, but you don't. That's the thing. People always assume they know what others want, but they don't. Emma was quiet, her mind racing with questions, but she didn't interrupt. You want to understand why I'm here, Robert continued. Why I drive that old car. Why I don't care about the latest trends. The truth is simple. I've spent my whole life building something that matters. And I've learned that the things that matter don't always show up in the way people expect. He stood up then, his movement slow but steady, as if he were in no rush. You'll figure it out one day, when you stop looking at what's on the surface. As Robert turned and walked away, Emma stood there, feeling as if the ground had shifted beneath her. His words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to shake, impossible to ignore. She didn't fully understand what he meant, but something deep inside her whispered that this was only the beginning. There was more to Robert Davis than the old car and the silence that surrounded him, and she would find out what it was, no matter what it took. The next few hours at the gala unfolded like a blur for Emma. She drifted between conversations, offering polite smiles and nods, but her mind kept circling back to Robert. The more she thought about him, the more his presence seemed to loom over the night, quiet yet undeniable. Gregory's words echoed in her ears, his casual dismissal of Robert as an old man who had simply missed the point of modern success. Yet Emma couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than that. She wasn't ready to let go of the mystery he presented. Every time she caught a glimpse of Robert, he seemed untouched by the superficiality around him. He wasn't seeking validation or clinking glasses with the rich and powerful. He didn't care for the false praise or the empty pleasantries. It was as if he existed outside the construct of this world, observing it from a distance, quietly confident in the knowledge of something deeper, something important. And she, Emma, with all her carefully curated Instagram photos, her well-planned networking, and her obsession with status, was left wondering if she was even capable of understanding that. The night wore on, and Robert, it seemed, had become more than just a curiosity for Emma. His earlier words about the things that matter kept rattling around in her head. What did that mean? What could someone like him, who had so little in common with the glittering crowd around them, have to offer? Was there a hidden wisdom in his indifference to the things she had been taught to value? Emma found herself trying to push those questions aside as she laughed at a joke, her phone buzzing with more messages, her head spinning with the constant need to keep up appearances. She was good at it. She was so good at it that she almost convinced herself she didn't need to ask questions anymore. Almost. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of clinking glasses and a deep voice calling her name. She turned to find Gregory standing beside her, his ever-present smile in place. "Enjoying the evening?" he asked smoothly, but his eyes seemed to be scanning her for something, as if trying to gauge her reaction to whatever was unfolding in her mind. "Of course," Emma replied, a bit too quickly. "It's all very impressive." Gregory studied her for a moment before nodding. "You've got a sharp mind, Emma. Don't let this world fool you. Not everything that shines is gold." The words struck her, though she wasn't entirely sure why. "What do you mean?" she asked before she could stop herself. Gregory's gaze flickered briefly toward Robert, who was once again standing at the far side of the room, now deep in conversation with a few others. Some people get lucky, others have the talent, and then there are those who just know how to play the game. I'm sure Robert Davis has his own version of success, but it's not the kind that gets you an invitation to the real table. He spoke the last few words almost to himself, as though questioning them as much as stating them. A man like him, he's got a good story, but at the end of the day, stories don't pay the bills. It's results that matter. Emma nodded absent-mindedly. She wasn't sure if Gregory was trying to warn her, flatter her, or simply stir up doubts. Either way, the words felt off, like they didn't quite sit with her. There was something about the way Gregory spoke about Robert that didn't sit right. She could sense his judgment, his need to diminish the man who had somehow caught her attention. She needed more answers. The world Gregory operated in, with its shiny surface of results and immediate gratification, was starting to feel less appealing to her. Something about it all seemed hollow, like a perfect painting of a house that was empty on the inside. She wanted to know what was behind Robert's quiet, enigmatic exterior. As if on cue, Robert turned and glanced in her direction. He didn't look directly at her, but his eyes passed over her with a kind of subtle recognition. It was as if, in that brief moment, he understood something about her, something she wasn't quite ready to admit to herself. He turned away from the crowd and began to make his way toward the exit. For a moment, Emma hesitated. Then, without thinking, she excused herself from Gregory and followed. The evening air was cool against her skin as she stepped out onto the balcony. The city stretched out before her, the lights twinkling like 1,000 tiny stars, each one representing a different life, a different story. She could hear the low hum of the Gala still echoing behind her, but it felt distant, like she was already a world away. Robert was standing at the edge of the balcony, gazing out at the view, his back to her. He didn't seem startled when she approached. He just waited, as if he knew she would follow. "You left the party early," Emma said, her voice soft, trying to keep the conversation from feeling too intrusive. Robert turned slightly, the faintest smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I've never been one to stick around for the grand finale. The best part is often over before everyone notices." She took a breath, gathering the courage to ask the question that had been on her mind all night. "Why do you come to these events if you don't care about any of it?" For a moment, Robert didn't answer. He simply stared out at the horizon, as though gathering his thoughts. Then, finally, he spoke. "Because," he said, his voice low, "it's a reminder." "A reminder of what?" she asked, puzzled. "A reminder that success isn't defined by what you own, what you wear, or what people think of you. It's defined by the choices you make, by what you build, and the way you treat people. You'll understand it one day when you stop measuring yourself by the same things everyone else does." Emma was silent, absorbing the weight of his words. She could feel the truth in them, like a door opening inside her. She didn't fully understand it, but she felt it, deep down, like a whisper in the back of her mind. Robert turned to face her then, his gaze steady and kind. "You're searching for something, Emma. I can see it in your eyes. But the world is full of distractions. People will try to tell you what you should want, what you should care about. But the only thing that matters is the truth you find inside yourself." His words were heavy, like a challenge, and something in Emma stirred. She had spent so much of her life trying to keep up with everyone around her, trying to prove she belonged in this world. But now, standing here with Robert, she realized how little of it felt real. She wanted to ask more, to know everything about him. But before she could, Robert turned and walked toward the parking lot, where his old car sat quietly under the streetlights. The faint glow from the hotel's windows reflected off the rusted surface, giving it an almost ethereal quality, as though it too were part of some grand story Emma wasn't yet ready to fully understand. She watched him go, a feeling of awe and uncertainty bubbling inside her. She had come to this event searching for answers, but it felt like the real journey was only just beginning. The night seemed to stretch on, but for Emma, the world had shifted ever so slightly. There were still so many questions, so much she didn't know. But one thing was certain. Whatever Robert Davis had, whatever quiet wisdom he carried with him, she wasn't going to stop until she understood it. And for the first time, the chase felt worth it. The days that followed the gala were a blur for Emma, filled with the usual rush of meetings, social media posts, and late-night conversations about the latest business trends. Yet, through it all, one thing lingered in her mind, like a quiet hum in the background. Robert Davis. The older man with the old car and the cryptic words that had unsettled her more than she cared to admit. She couldn't shake the memory of him, of his calm demeanor, his unbothered presence in a world that prided itself on noise and excess. Emma found herself increasingly distracted at work, her attention divided. Even her phone seemed to hold less appeal than usual. The latest influencer campaign she was managing didn't seem nearly as important as it once had. The pressure to keep up with trends, to maintain the glossy facade of success, suddenly felt hollow. It was a Tuesday afternoon when she first saw the email from Robert. It was simple, no frills, just a subject line that caught her off guard. The truth about legacy. She clicked it without thinking, her fingers trembling slightly as she read the short message. If you want to understand what I meant, meet me at the shop tomorrow, 2 p.m. There was no signature, just the email address, *Robert@davislegacy.com*. Her heart skipped. Robert had a legacy. The quiet mechanic who had, until recently, been a mere curiosity in her life, now seemed to be far more than the eccentric older man she had imagined. The email was an invitation, an open door into something she hadn't even known she was looking for. She hesitated for only a moment before her fingers moved to reply, her thoughts already racing. She wasn't sure what she was hoping to find, but the idea of uncovering whatever truth Robert was offering felt like an opportunity she couldn't pass up. The next day, Emma arrived at Robert's shop a little early. The building was an unassuming place, a small industrial-style workshop tucked away on a side street. It wasn't the kind of place she would have ever thought to visit, especially not when compared to the sleek, polished businesses she typically worked with. The exterior was weathered, the paint peeling in places, and there was a faint smell of oil and gasoline in the air. The shop seemed forgotten by time, as though it existed in a space between past and present, just like Robert. She stood outside for a moment, gathering her thoughts before entering. The door creaked as she pushed it open, the sound echoing in the quiet space. Inside, the shop was dimly lit, with old tools hanging neatly on the walls and a few vintage cars in various stages of restoration. It was a place of work, not display. The air was thick with the scent of grease, but it was a comforting smell, a reminder of things built with care and skill. Robert was standing near the back of the shop, leaning over a dusty engine, his hands steady and sure as they worked. He didn't seem to notice her right away, but Emma couldn't take her eyes off him. There was something about the way he moved, the focus in his eyes as he adjusted the parts of the engine. It was like watching an artist at work, someone who had mastered his craft to the point that it came as naturally as breathing. "Glad you came," Robert said without looking up. His voice, though quiet, carried an authority that made Emma feel as though she had been waiting for this moment all along. "I didn't know what to expect," Emma admitted, stepping further into the shop, her eyes scanning the old vehicles around her. "I didn't even know you were in the car business." Robert smiled slightly, the expression more out of understanding than amusement. "Most people don't," he said. "It's not the kind of business that gets flashy marketing or glossy advertisements. It's just about doing things the right way, building things that last." Emma took a breath, feeling the weight of his words settle in. The entire shop, from the old cars to the worn tools, spoke of craftsmanship, of time and care invested in every part. It felt real, unlike the world she had come from, where everything seemed manufactured to look perfect and instantly gratifying. This place had a kind of authenticity she couldn't ignore. Robert wiped his hands on a rag and stood up, walking toward a workbench piled high with tools and sketches. "Take a look around," he said. "I want you to understand something." Emma hesitated for a moment, but the curiosity was too strong. She began to walk slowly around the shop, her fingers grazing the metal surfaces of the vehicles, the leather seats of a vintage car that looked like it had seen decades of use. There were rows of meticulously organized tools, some of them worn from years of use, others new, but all clearly cared for. In the corner, there was a shelf filled with old photographs and blueprints, some frayed and yellowed with age, others crisp and new. "What is all this?" Emma asked, her voice softer than she'd intended. "It's my legacy," Robert said simply, sitting on a stool and looking at her. "These cars aren't just machines. They're stories, pieces of history. I started with nothing, a few old tools, a beat-up car, and a dream to build something that mattered. The business grew, slowly, not by chasing trends, but by focusing on quality. The right materials, the right people, the right vision. I didn't care about fame or money or being on some list. I just wanted to build cars that would last." Emma stood still, absorbing the weight of his words. She looked back at the vehicles around her, each one seeming to tell a story. They weren't shiny brand new models with polished chrome. They had character. They had depth. She could see the love and the time it took to restore each one, to breathe new life into them. The thought struck her like a lightning bolt. What if this was what she had been missing? A purpose beyond the endless chase for validation. A way to create something meaningful, something lasting. "I thought I understood success," Emma said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't think I ever understood it like this." Robert nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's the thing, Emma. Success isn't about how much you have or what people see on the outside. It's about what you build, what you leave behind, the choices you make, the things you stand for. That's how you know you've done something worth doing." The words hit her harder than she expected. She had spent so much of her life chasing an image, an ideal of success that had been defined for her by society, by her friends, by the people she worked with. But standing here in this old, humble shop, everything felt different. The world of influencers, the glossy brands, the endless stream of content, it all felt so small now. She felt the weight of what Robert was offering, the chance to create something real. She turned to him, her eyes searching his face for something more. "But why? Why didn't you just sell out, get bigger, expand? Why stay like this?" Robert smiled again, the smile of someone who had lived long enough to know the answer without having to explain it. "Because what I've built isn't about impressing others. It's about building something that will last. A legacy that goes beyond the car or the business. It's about integrity. You can't fake that. You either have it or you don't." Emma didn't respond immediately. She walked over to a car in the corner, a beautiful vintage model that looked like it had been restored with meticulous care. She ran her fingers along the edge of the door, feeling the craftsmanship in the curve of the metal. "It's perfect," she said quietly. Robert nodded. "It's not perfect, but it's something that will last." And in that moment, Emma realized that it wasn't just the cars Robert built that were enduring. It was the values that had driven him to build them. The idea that success didn't lie in fleeting moments or external validation. It wasn't about the next big sale or the perfect Instagram post. It was about creating something that would stand the test of time, something that could outlast trends, outlast fame, and leave a lasting impact on the world. She looked at Robert, a new understanding dawning in her eyes. "I think I understand now," she said. He didn't say anything in reply. He simply nodded, as though he'd known all along that one day she would. As Emma left the shop, she felt a weight lift from her chest. The world outside, the flashy cars, the bright lights, the relentless chase for validation, felt far away. She had been looking for answers in all the wrong places. The truth wasn't out there, in the latest trends or in the praise of others. It was inside her, waiting to be uncovered, waiting to be built. And for the first time, Emma knew exactly where to begin. The days that followed her visit to Robert's shop felt like a quiet turning point in Emma's life. She returned to her usual routine, but everything had subtly shifted. The world she had once been so immersed in, the world of curated photos, influencer status, and networking, seemed smaller now, less important. What had once felt like the only path forward now appeared shallow and fleeting. She began questioning the very nature of her success. Was it real? Or was it just a reflection of other people's expectations of her? Her followers, her colleagues, even her friends, all of them seemed to orbit a version of herself that didn't fully exist. She had crafted a life that looked perfect from the outside, but on the inside, she felt hollow, like a beautifully painted shell with nothing inside. Her mind returned, again and again, to Robert's words. Success isn't about what you own or what people think of you. It's about what you build, the choices you make. Those words had been simple, but their impact was profound. It wasn't just about the cars he had restored or the legacy he had crafted. It was about his approach to life, his refusal to play by the rules that everyone else seemed to follow. Emma found herself thinking about the future with a new sense of possibility. She started researching companies that aligned more with her newfound ideals. Businesses built on authenticity, on quality, on legacy. She visited small, independent brands and artisans who created things that had substance, things that would stand the test of time. She even began dabbling with the idea of creating her own brand, one that championed authenticity and craft over fleeting trends. But it wasn't easy. The pull of her old life, the allure of the glitzy, fast-paced world she had been part of, remained. She still had meetings with her high-powered clients, still had to deal with the constant pressure of maintaining a polished image. She still received invites to exclusive events, where the conversation always seemed to center around the same predictable topics. The next big deal, the latest celebrity collaboration, and how many followers someone had. One afternoon, after a particularly draining meeting with a potential client who kept pushing for more social media hype, Emma found herself standing in front of her office window, staring out at the city below. Her phone buzzed with another email from Gregory, a follow-up to one of their many conversations about business opportunities. The subject line read, "Big news, a game changer in the industry." Emma hesitated, then tossed her phone on her desk. She wasn't interested. Not right now, not anymore. The truth was she was tired. Tired of the games. Tired of trying to fit herself into a world that never seemed to be truly hers. She missed the raw authenticity of Robert's shop, the way he worked with his hands, the quiet confidence he had in building something that lasted. She missed the simplicity of his worldview. That evening after dinner, she sat at her kitchen table, staring at her laptop screen. She had been considering something for a while now, something that seemed impossible when she first thought of it. But with each passing day, the idea became clearer. She wanted to build something meaningful. A brand, yes, but a brand that stood for something deeper than just sales numbers and followers. She wanted to create a product, a service that could make a difference in people's lives. But where to begin? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on her door. It was late and she hadn't been expecting anyone. She stood up, confused, but as soon as she opened the door, she saw Robert standing in the hallway. His presence in the doorway felt like a quiet reassurance, like a constant in a world that had become increasingly chaotic. "Robert," Emma said, surprised but not entirely shocked. She had half expected him to reach out again, but she hadn't anticipated it so soon. "What are you doing here?" He looked at her with those calm, knowing eyes. "I thought you might be ready for the next step," he said simply. Emma blinked, unsure how to respond. She had no idea what he meant, but something about his demeanor suggested he wasn't here to waste time. Robert stepped into the apartment, looking around with a quiet sort of appreciation, as though he was seeing something more than just the furniture and decor. "Your world is very different from mine," he said after a moment. "But it's not wrong, you're just on a different path. I can see you're wrestling with it. Wrestling with what it means to build something of your own, to step away from all the noise. You know that it's not about fitting in anymore. It's about creating something real, something with substance." Emma nodded slowly. His words always seemed to find their way straight to her heart. He didn't need to explain himself further. She understood, but she also felt a pang of doubt, an uncertainty about how to begin. "What's next?" she asked. Robert gave her a look that seemed both understanding and patient. "Next? You make a decision. You stop trying to be everything to everyone and start being true to yourself. Don't get caught up in the trends. Build something that matters." Emma couldn't help but ask, "But how? I don't have a legacy like you do. I don't have a history of craftsmanship or a small business built from the ground up." Robert smiled, almost as though he had been waiting for her to ask the question. "You build your own legacy, Emma. You don't need a perfect starting point. You have the skills, the drive, and the ideas, but more importantly, you have something the rest of them don't. Clarity. Clarity on what truly matters." The conversation lingered in the air, thick with unspoken possibilities. Emma felt like she was on the cusp of something huge, something that could change the entire course of her life. But it was also terrifying. The idea of stepping away from the safety of her polished career and diving into the unknown felt like the ultimate gamble. She looked at Robert, still standing there in her living room, as though he had quietly entered her world to offer the kind of wisdom that could never be learned from textbooks or conferences. He had the kind of calm that came only with time and experience, things she hadn't yet accumulated but desperately needed. "I don't even know where to start," she admitted, her voice small, almost vulnerable. Robert chuckled, a soft, warm sound. "Start by building something with integrity. That's the key. Integrity in what you create, in who you are. The rest will follow. But it all begins with you making a choice. You can't wait for it to happen, Emma. You have to make it happen." For the first time in a long time, Emma felt a sense of clarity settle over her. She didn't know all the answers, and she didn't need to. The next step wasn't about having a perfect plan. It was about finding the courage to take it, to stop being afraid of failure, of falling short. Robert turned to leave, and as he stepped out of the door, he paused and looked back over his shoulder. "One last thing," he said. "Don't get caught up in the idea of perfection. You'll never get there. Just build something real." Emma stood at the door, watching him disappear into the night, and for the first time in ages she felt ready. Ready to stop hiding behind the glossy facade and start creating something that would last. She knew her journey wouldn't be easy, but it had already begun. And somehow, for the first time, she was okay with that. The days following Robert's visit felt like a whirlwind of clarity and uncertainty, all rolled into one. Emma had always prided herself on her ability to plan, to make calculated moves and follow through with precision. But now, faced with the daunting task of creating something real, something lasting, she was forced to let go of the rigid control she had once clung to. For the first time, the idea of success felt like something she could define for herself, not dictated by likes, followers, or the fleeting praise of influencers, but by something far deeper. But clarity didn't come without its challenges. Emma's first steps were hesitant. She spent hours poring over ideas about sustainability, craftsmanship, and authenticity. But the more she researched, the more she realized how vast the field was. Everyone was trying to be authentic, or at least appear authentic. Everywhere she looked, brands touted their handmade products, their ethical sourcing, their legacy. But what did it really mean to build something with integrity when the world was flooded with cheap imitations? How could she, an outsider to the world of true craftsmanship, ever create something that felt as genuine as Robert's old cars? She took notes in a journal, sketching out vague ideas for a potential brand, one that would embrace quality over quantity, sustainability over fast fashion. The words legacy and integrity appeared on nearly every page, but the how was still elusive. What would it look like to build something that mattered? And then there was the problem of her old life, the world she had come from, the glamorous events, the endless networking, the constant push for new clients, was still very much alive. Emma found herself caught between two worlds, trying to navigate the path she felt was right while being constantly pulled back into the one she had been living. It was like trying to break free from a pattern of behavior that had been so deeply ingrained in her, so familiar, that it felt like second nature. One night, as she scrolled through social media after a long day of research, she came across a post from Gregory. It was a picture of him in front of a new luxury car he was promoting, his usual brand of polished success. The caption read, "Excited to announce the latest collaboration with one of the biggest names in the industry. Watch this space. The future is limitless." Emma stared at the post for a long moment, a mixture of admiration and doubt swirling inside her. Gregory had always been the embodiment of success in her eyes, polished, influential, and seemingly unstoppable. He had built his empire on the very principles she was now questioning. The fast-paced world of trends, celebrity endorsements, and high-dollar deals was everything she had worked so hard to achieve. But now, standing at the threshold of something new, something that felt more authentic, she began to wonder if it was all just a facade. Her phone buzzed again, and this time, it was a message from Gregory. "I've got a meeting with one of your clients tomorrow. Should be an easy win for both of us, looking forward to it. Let's grab dinner afterward and talk about your next big move. I think we can really push this new brand of yours." Emma's heart sank a little. Part of her knew Gregory was right. He could help her take her new idea to the next level, make it as big and successful as anything else she had been involved in. He was a master at getting results, at turning ideas into profit. But was that what she wanted? Was that the path she had in mind when she thought about creating something that would leave a legacy? The next morning, Emma dressed for the meeting with a strange sense of detachment. She had spent the previous night drafting ideas for her brand, but she still wasn't sure what it would look like. The image was blurry, the edges undefined. She hadn't even thought about a name yet. The old Emma, the one who thrived on precision, would have never let herself get this far without having all the details figured out. But now, with each passing day, she was learning that it wasn't about having all the answers up front. It was about starting, even if the path wasn't clear. The meeting with her client went as expected. Efficient, focused, and ultimately transactional. Gregory, who had joined them at the last minute, worked his usual charm, effortlessly steering the conversation toward the next big thing. Emma played her part, offering strategic suggestions, but her mind kept wandering. She was only half present, listening to Gregory's fast-paced rhetoric, but not fully engaged. It was when they stepped out of the meeting, walking toward the elevator, that Gregory looked over at Emma and said, "You're quiet today. You've been distant lately. What's going on?" Emma hesitated. She had always prided herself on being the consummate professional around Gregory, but this time she couldn't shake the feeling that his world was no longer hers. "I'm thinking," she replied softly, "about something different, something more real." Gregory raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but also slightly concerned. "Real? What are you talking about? You've got a great thing going here. This is your world, Emma. You can take it to the next level, but you've got to stay in the game." Emma felt a pang of doubt. She had worked so hard to get here, to climb this ladder. But now, as Gregory spoke, it felt like he was speaking to someone else. His vision of success, the one that had always seemed so appealing, suddenly felt empty. She thought of Robert's shop, the cars in various stages of restoration, the patience it took to craft something real, something that lasted. "I'm not sure I want to be in the game anymore," Emma said quietly. Gregory stopped walking, his eyes narrowing in confusion. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean, I'm starting to realize there's more to life than the hustle. I want to create something that lasts, something with meaning," Emma said, surprising herself with how definitive her voice sounded. Gregory's face softened for a moment, but then he scoffed, his tone shifting back to his usual persuasive edge. "Meaning? Emma, we're talking about real opportunities here. You can build something big, but you've got to play the game if you want to win." Emma stood still, feeling the weight of his words, but also feeling something else, the stirrings of a new conviction inside her. She didn't need to play the game. Not the way he meant it. Not anymore. "I think I need to step back from all this," she said, finally finding her voice. Gregory stared at her, his eyes a mix of confusion and frustration. "Are you serious? You're just going to walk away from everything we've built? From everything you've worked for?" Emma nodded. "I'm not walking away. I'm just changing direction." For the first time, Gregory didn't have the right words. His mouth opened as if to argue, but then he closed it, realizing that this was a conversation he wasn't prepared for. He let out a frustrated sigh, but his gaze softened. "I don't get it, but okay, it's your call." Emma didn't look back as she walked away from him. She felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension, but above all, she felt more sure of herself than she had in a long time. The next few weeks were a blur of activity as Emma dove headfirst into the process of defining her new brand. She didn't have all the answers, but she had a vision, a direction. It wasn't about becoming the next influencer or chasing after the approval of others. It was about creating something real, something grounded in values of integrity and authenticity. It was about building a legacy, not just a business. And for the first time, Emma was excited, not by the idea of success, but by the possibility of creating something that could truly make a difference. The weeks that followed Emma's decision to take a new direction were both invigorating and challenging. Her life, once full of carefully curated meetings, brand deals, and constant networking, had suddenly slowed down. At first, the quiet felt like a void, an emptiness she wasn't sure how to fill. But as the days passed, Emma began to understand that this quiet wasn't a space of nothing. It was a space of possibility. The constant noise of her previous life had drowned out the voice inside her that had always yearned for something deeper, something real. And now, with that voice finally in the foreground, she had the space to build. Her first challenge was defining exactly what it was she wanted to create. She knew that her brand had to be different, but how could she make something that stood apart from the countless others that claimed to be authentic and sustainable? Every brand seemed to market themselves as the solution to the world's problems, offering organic materials or ethical labor practices. But the deeper Emma dug, the more she realized that many of them were just offering hollow promises. They weren't building anything lasting, they were simply riding a trend. She needed to do better. She needed to find something that went beyond surface-level sustainability. She wanted to build a brand that spoke to people on a deeper level, one that was rooted in a genuine sense of purpose. But what that purpose was, she wasn't entirely sure yet. Every evening, after hours of brainstorming and research, Emma would sit at her kitchen table with her notebook, reflecting on Robert's words. Start with integrity. Build something that lasts. She began to understand that building a brand didn't just mean producing a product. It meant creating a community, a philosophy, a story. It was about aligning her values with her actions, about making decisions that reflected her core beliefs, not just market trends. Her focus began to narrow. She started considering the world of craftsmanship, the world Robert had come from. What if she could merge the worlds of craftsmanship and modern consumerism? What if she could create something that was timeless, something that would outlast trends, something that could actually be a legacy? The more she thought about it, the more she felt drawn to the idea of combining sustainable design with high-quality craftsmanship, creating products that didn't just serve a purpose, but were also works of art in themselves. It wasn't going to be easy. Emma didn't have a background in design, let alone the kind of deep knowledge of craftsmanship that people like Robert had. But she had something else, an understanding of what it meant to create a story. She understood branding, marketing, and how to tell a compelling narrative. What she needed now were partners, people who could bring her ideas to life, who could help her create something with authenticity and integrity. That's when she found Marcus. Marcus was a craftsman she discovered after doing some research into small, independent makers who worked with leather and sustainable materials. His workshop was located in a quiet corner of the city, far from the flashy stores and busy downtown streets. It was an unassuming place, much like Robert's shop, but when Emma visited, she felt a sense of calm and clarity that she hadn't felt in a long time. Marcus was in his late 40s, with a salt and pepper beard and hands that spoke of years of hard work and skill. He was deeply passionate about his craft, and his workshop reflected that. It was a place of organized chaos. Tools hung on the walls, half-finished pieces sat on workbenches, and the smell of rich leather filled the air. The raw materials he worked with were beautiful. Each piece seemed to tell a story of its own. "I don't usually take on new projects," Marcus said when Emma first approached him, but there was something in her eyes, something about the way she spoke that intrigued him. "But you seem serious. What's your idea?" Emma had come prepared. She had sketches, rough outlines of designs, and a vision for a brand that would combine old-world craftsmanship with modern values. As she spoke, she could see Marcus listening intently, nodding occasionally, his eyes narrowing as he considered what she was saying. "I want to create a brand that feels timeless," she said. "One that's rooted in integrity. I want to combine modern design with traditional craftsmanship, something that's built to last, something that people will value for years, not just for a season." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting over the work he had already done. Finally, he spoke. "It's a bold idea. A lot of people are chasing trends right now, but that's not what I'm interested in. I've spent my life building things that stand the test of time, not things that get tossed away after a season. If you want to build something that's real, I'll help you, but we have to make sure we're on the same page. We're not going to rush this. It's about quality, not speed. If you're in, we'll do this right." Emma smiled, relieved. This was the kind of partner she needed. Someone who understood the importance of quality, who wasn't afraid to take the time to get it right. Over the next few weeks, Emma and Marcus worked together to refine the idea. She spent hours at his workshop, watching him work, learning about the process behind each product. Marcus showed her how leather was cut, how it was stitched, how every piece was crafted with precision and care. It was a slow, deliberate process, nothing like the fast-paced, results-driven world Emma had come from. But the more she saw of the work, the more she understood that this was how things were meant to be done. Not rushed, not manufactured, but made. One afternoon, as they sat together over coffee in the workshop, Emma spoke about the bigger picture. "I want people to feel connected to what we create," she said. "I want them to understand the story behind the product, the care that went into making it. We're not just selling a bag or a wallet. We're offering a piece of something meaningful, something that can be passed down through generations." Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful. People are tired of things that don't last. They want something real, something they can trust. But it's not just about the product, it's about the story. If we can tell the story right, if we can make people feel like they're part of something, they'll come. They'll understand. As the weeks turned into months, Emma's vision slowly began to take shape. She started working on the branding, crafting a story that would connect with people on a deeper level. She knew she didn't want to rely on the glossy advertising tactics that had once worked for her. This was about real connections, about building a community of people who valued quality over convenience. She named the brand Legacy & Company, a tribute to the timeless nature of the products they were creating, and to the kind of business she wanted to build. But even as Emma worked to bring her vision to life, she knew that challenges lay ahead. The world she was stepping into was different from the one she had left behind, and the path would not be easy. There were still moments of doubt, moments when the pull of her old life beckoned. But each time she wavered, she thought of Robert's words, "Build something that lasts." And slowly, piece by piece, Emma began to do just that. The first product, a leather wallet, simple and beautifully crafted, was ready for launch. She knew it wasn't perfect, it wasn't flashy, but it was real. And it was the beginning of something far greater than any brand deal or Instagram post could ever offer. It was the start of a legacy. The launch of Legacy & Company was quiet, almost understated. There were no big splashy ads or influencer partnerships, no elaborate PR campaigns. Emma wasn't interested in drawing attention to the brand through gimmicks or fleeting trends. She wanted the products to speak for themselves, to be seen and appreciated by those who understood the value of craftsmanship, integrity, and timeless design. For the first few weeks, things moved slowly. Emma and Marcus worked tirelessly behind the scenes, perfecting their products and refining the brand's message. They spent hours working on the website, developing the story behind each item, ensuring that every detail was just right. They wanted customers to understand that they weren't just buying a piece of leather. They were buying a part of something bigger, a philosophy rooted in authenticity. Word of mouth, however, began to spread. A few of Marcus's loyal clients, who had seen his work for years, shared their excitement about the new brand with friends. A couple of Emma's old colleagues from her previous life in the influencer world took notice too, intrigued by the concept of Legacy & Company and its focus on sustainability and quality. One day, Emma received a call that caught her off guard. It was from an old friend, Jasmine, a high-profile fashion blogger with millions of followers. Jasmine had always been part of Emma's network, someone she'd shared tips and opportunities with, but they hadn't spoken much since Emma had started distancing herself from the influencer world. "Emma, I've been following Legacy & Company, and I have to say I'm impressed." Jasmine's voice was bright, but there was an edge of something else in it. Curiosity, maybe even surprise. "I love what you're doing, but why so quiet? Why aren't you pushing this harder? You've got the platform, the connections. You could blow this up, no problem." Emma hesitated. Part of her had always respected Jasmine's influence, her ability to turn a brand into a sensation with just a few posts, a few well-placed endorsements. But that wasn't what she wanted for Legacy & Company. She didn't want to flood the market with quick hits, with viral moments that would fade as quickly as they arrived. She wanted to build something that lasted, something that didn't need the fast-paced push of influencer culture to thrive. "I'm doing it differently this time, Jasmine," Emma said, her voice steady but resolute. "I'm building something with integrity. I want Legacy & Company to be about more than just sales or popularity. It's about the people who believe in quality, in craftsmanship, in something that lasts beyond the next trend. I don't want to be part of the constant chase for likes and followers. I want to create something real." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Jasmine spoke, her tone softer now. "I get it. I really do. But just remember, Emma, being real doesn't mean staying small. You've got the ability to make a big impact. Don't sell yourself short." "I'm not selling myself short," Emma replied, her conviction growing stronger with each word. "I'm taking the time to build something meaningful." After they hung up, Emma sat for a while, staring at her phone. Part of her felt the tug of Jasmine's words, the desire for recognition, for validation. But the deeper part of her knew that the path she had chosen was the right one. This wasn't about seeking approval. It was about standing firm in her own vision, no matter how slowly things progressed. Over the next few months, Legacy & Company began to grow, slowly but steadily. People who believed in the same values Emma did started to take notice. A handful of loyal customers returned, not just for the quality of the products, but for the story they represented. They appreciated the idea of investing in something that wasn't just fashionable, it was meaningful. Emma continued to work alongside Marcus, refining their designs, experimenting with new materials, and pushing the boundaries of what Legacy & Company could represent. They had launched the leather wallets, and now they were working on a collection of bags, each one designed with care and attention to detail. There was no rush. Emma didn't want to churn out products just for the sake of it. Every item had to feel like a reflection of the brand's core values: craftsmanship, sustainability, and longevity. But as her brand grew, so did the pressure. Gregory, ever the ambitious businessman, reached out to Emma again, this time with an enticing offer. He had heard through mutual contacts that Legacy and Company was starting to turn heads, and he wanted in. "I've got a new platform that would be perfect for you, Emma," Gregory said over the phone, his tone smooth and persuasive. "We could help you scale Legacy and Company to the next level. With my connections and your product, we could dominate the market. Think of the possibilities." Emma listened, but a part of her felt the familiar unease that she had experienced when she had worked with Gregory before. The promises of quick growth, of numbers and metrics and profit margins, they all sounded appealing on the surface, but they didn't align with what she wanted to build. "Gregory, I appreciate the offer," she said, her voice calm but firm, "but that's not the direction I'm taking. I'm not interested in rushing the process or chasing after the next big thing. I'm focused on building something that lasts, something real." Gregory was silent for a moment, clearly taken aback. "You sure about that? You could be making a lot more money, a lot faster." "I'm sure," Emma replied, a weight lifting from her chest as she said the words out loud. "I'm building something for the long term, not just for the quick win." The conversation ended with a cordial goodbye, but Emma could sense that Gregory didn't truly understand her decision. He had always been about speed, about getting to the top as quickly as possible, but Emma knew that was no longer her path. As Legacy & Co. continued to grow, Emma found herself grappling with the very decision she had made months earlier, to build something meaningful and enduring, no matter the challenges. There were moments of doubt, times when she wondered if she had made the right choice, times when the pull of the fast-paced, high-reward world of her past seemed almost too tempting. But each time she returned to the same truth that had guided her from the beginning: integrity over fame, craftsmanship over trends, quality over quantity. One morning, as she sat in Marcus's workshop, looking over the first batch of bags for their upcoming release, Emma realized just how far they had come. This was the beginning of something far greater than she had ever imagined. Not just a business, but a legacy, a brand that would stand the test of time, rooted in the values she believed in. And for the first time in years, Emma felt truly fulfilled. She was no longer chasing after validation, no longer trying to fit into a mold that wasn't hers. She was building something that was hers, and hers alone, something real, something that would last. The road ahead was uncertain, and Emma knew there would be challenges, but she no longer feared them. She had found her path, and with each step she was creating a legacy that would endure for generations to come. And that was enough. Sometimes, the greatest stories aren't the ones that fit the mold, but the ones that break it. This man's unexpected reveal teaches us that we shouldn't judge others by appearances, as true success often lies beneath the surface. In a world obsessed with status and image, it's a powerful reminder that real wealth isn't just about what you drive or wear. It's about what you've built, who you are, and the impact you leave behind. Stay curious, stay humble, and always remember, appearances can be deceiving.